She was invisible to everyone, just another assistant in a world of powerful men. So when mysterious love notes started appearing on her desk, she was certain they were meant for someone else.
Someone's playing a cruel joke. Poetry isn't meant for people like me.
But the notes kept coming, each one more intimate than the last, until the day Seattle's youngest billionaire CEO walked into her break room. And everything changed.
I didn't want the suit to speak first. I wanted you to like the voice behind the words.
The man who had everything had been watching her, writing to her, falling for the one woman who didn't even know she existed in his world.
Men like you don't notice women like me without a reason.
Then let me know you. Have dinner with me.
Two worlds, one impossible love. When society's expectations collide with matters of the heart, will a billionaire's empire be enough to bridge the gap? Or will the woman who taught him to love walk away before he can prove she's worth more than his fortune? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. The morning light spilled through the windows of Clarion Tower, illuminating the polished marble floors and glass offices where Seattle's business elite worked. Imani Rhodes adjusted her simple black blazer and straightened the stack of reports on her desk. At 27, she was already known as the most efficient executive assistant in the building, though few people bothered to learn her name. "Coffee, Ms. Rhodes?" asked the intern passing by her desk. "No, then KU." "I prefer tea," Imani replied with a small smile. The intern nodded and moved on, already forgetting the exchange. That was how it always was for Imani. People saw her, but they didn't see her, and that was fine. After growing up bounced between 6 different foster homes, she'd learned that being noticed often led to disappointment. Imani's desk sat just outside the office of Margaret Winters, Senior Vice President of Marketing. It was a good job with benefits and stability, two things Imani valued above all else. She checked her watch and began her morning routine, arranging Margaret's schedule, preparing briefing notes for the day's meetings and making sure everything ran smoothly. At 9:30 a.m. the elevator doors opened and several executives stepped out, their voices loud as they discussed quarterly projections. Imani kept her eyes on her computer screen, typing efficiently. "The Patterson account numbers are wrong," one of the men said. "Someone in accounting messed up." Without looking up, Imani spoke. "Actually, the Patterson numbers were revised yesterday. The updated report is in your email, Mr. Davidson." The group paused, looking at her with surprise. Most hadn't even realized she was there. "Oh, right, thank you." Mr. Davidson trailed off, clearly not remembering her name. "Imani," she supplied, still focused on her screen. "Right. Thanks." The executives continued down the hall, already onto their next topic. But one man lingered behind, watching her with interest. Imani didn't notice him. Lucian Vale, CEO of Valetech and the youngest billionaire in the Pacific Northwest, had been invited to Clarion Tower for a potential partnership meeting. At 30, he had built an empire that made other executives twice his age nervous. He was known for his brilliant mind and cold demeanor, not for noticing executive assistants. But something about the way Imani had spoken up, confidently but without seeking praise, caught his attention. While everyone else in the building seemed desperate for recognition, she simply did her job well and expected nothing in return. Lucian continued down the hall, his mind still on the woman at the desk. 3 days later, Imani arrived at work to find something unexpected on her desk. A small folded note tucked beneath her tea mug. She opened it with furrowed brows. "You're the most graceful part of this building. Even when you don't speak, the air listens." Imani read it twice, then looked around. No one was watching her. With a shake of her head, she crumpled the note and tossed it in the trash. Clearly, it had been misdelivered. Poetry wasn't meant for people like her. The next morning, she found another note. "Your smile, though rare, changes the energy of every room you enter. I noticed." This time, Imani felt a flutter of confusion. Was someone playing a joke? In her experience, attention from others usually came with expectations. She tucked the note into her drawer and tried to forget about it, but the notes continued. Each morning for a week, a new message waited for her. "The way you remember everyone's coffee order but no one remembers your tea preference. You deserve better. I watched you help the janitor pick up papers someone else dropped without being asked. Kindness without audience is rare. Your eyes hold stories you never tell. I'd listen if you wanted to share them. By Friday, Imani was unsettled. She'd begun arriving earlier, hoping to catch whoever was leaving the notes, but they were always there before her. Someone's playing a cruel joke, she muttered to herself as she read the latest note. The idea that someone was actually watching her, admiring her, seemed impossible. In her 27 years, Imani had learned that people wanted things from you. They didn't just give compliments without expecting something in return. She confided in her only friend at work, Tyler, who worked in the IT department. Secret admirer notes? That's straight out of a romance movie, Tyler said, leaning against her desk during lunch break. It's probably a prank, Imani replied, or they're meant for someone else. Tyler raised an eyebrow. Why is it so hard to believe someone noticed you? Imani shrugged. Because no one does. I'm practically invisible here. Not to everyone, apparently. Tyler nodded toward her drawer where she'd stashed the notes. Want me to check the security cameras? See who's been visiting your desk in the early morning? Imani considered it, then shook her head. No, it'll stop eventually. But it didn't stop. Monday morning, Imani stepped off the elevator and froze. On her desk was not a note, but a small arrangement of wildflowers in a simple glass vase. A card rested against it. With trembling fingers, she opened it. I see you, and I'm still watching. Not to test you, just to learn how you glow when no one's looking. Imani sank into her chair, heart racing. This had gone beyond a simple prank. Someone was truly watching her. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. Nice flowers, Margaret commented as she walked past Imani's desk. Birthday? No, Imani replied softly. Just a gift. Margaret raised her eyebrows but didn't press further. The quarterly review meeting is at 10. Make sure the conference room is set up. Already done, Imani said, slipping back into her professional role. But throughout the day, her eyes kept drifting to the flowers. They weren't expensive roses or elaborate orchids, just simple wildflowers. The kind that grew through cracks in sidewalks against all odds. The kind most people walked past without noticing. The kind that reminded her of herself. Lucian Vale sat in his corner office at Vale Tech headquarters, staring at his phone. The morning sunlight glinted off the Seattle skyline, but he barely noticed the view most executives would kill for. His assistant Robert entered after a brisk knock. The development team is ready for you, sir. Lucian nodded. How did she react? Robert paused, understanding immediately. She seemed surprised by the flowers, confused. Did she smile? Eventually, when she thought no one was looking. Lucian nodded again, satisfied. That's all. Robert hesitated. Sir, if I may, this is quite unusual for you. The board meeting is tomorrow, the Chen merger is on the line, and you're concerned about an executive assistant at Clarion. Lucian fixed his cold gaze on Robert. My personal matters are not your concern. Of course, my apologies. Robert left quickly, closing the door behind him. Alone again, Lucian opened his desk drawer and pulled out a small notebook. He'd been writing the notes there first, testing the words before transferring them to the note cards he left on Imani's desk. He wasn't sure why he'd started this. The woman had simply caught his attention with her quiet competence. In a world where everyone performed D for his benefit, laughing too loudly at his jokes, agreeing with his every word, her authenticity was like finding water in a desert. Lucian had everything money could buy. His penthouse overlooked the city. His cars were custom-built and people feared his intelligence and power. But no one had ever seen past his wealth, past his title. He had a feeling Imani Rhodes would, if she gave him the chance. The thought unsettled him. Lucian Vale didn't chase women. They chased him for his money, his influence, his last name. This feeling of uncertainty was foreign and uncomfortable. Yet he couldn't stop thinking about the way she'd corrected that executive without seeking credit, the way she arrived early and stayed late, the small kindnesses he'd observed her performing when she thought no one was watching. He wanted to know her story, and for the first time in his life, Lucian Vale was afraid of rejection. 2 weeks after the first note appeared, Imani was sitting in the empty break room during her late lunch. Everyone else ate at noon, but she preferred the quiet of the 1:30 lunchtime. She unwrapped her sandwich and opened her book. "Pride and Prejudice," said a deep voice from the doorway. A classic. Imani looked up, startled. A tall man with dark hair and piercing blue eyes stood watching her. She recognized him immediately. Lucian Vale, the tech billionaire whose face regularly appeared in business magazines. He'd been in and out of Clarion Tower for meetings over the past month, though she'd never spoken to him. "Yes," she said simply, unsure why he was talking to her. "Darcy is often misunderstood," he continued, stepping into the room. "People see his wealth and his coldness, but not the loyalty beneath." Imani closed her book. "Is there something I can help you with, Mr. Vale? The executive dining room IS on the top floor." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "I know where it is. I prefer the quiet down here." He gestured to the empty chair across from her. "May I?" Every instinct told Imani to say no. Men like Lucian Vale didn't sit with executive assistants in break rooms, but curiosity won out. "It's a public space," she said with a small shrug. He sat down, his expensive suit a stark contrast to the worn break room furniture. "You're Imani Rhodes." She stiffened. "How do you know my name?" "I notice things others miss," he said simply. A chill ran through her. The notes, the flowers. Could it possibly be? No. That was ridiculous. Billionaires didn't leave anonymous notes for assistants. "Your reputation precedes you, Mr. Vale," she said carefully. "The ruthless tech genius." He studied her face. "Reputations rarely tell the whole story. Don't you agree?" Before she could answer, her phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. "I need to get back to work," she said, gathering her things. "Of course." He stood when she did, an old-fashioned courtesy that caught her off guard. "It was nice to finally talk with you, Imani." The way he said her name made her pause, like he'd been practicing it, like it mattered. "Goodbye, Mr. Vale," she said, hurrying out of the break room, her heart pounding for reasons she couldn't explain. Back at her desk, Imani tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept drifting to the strange encounter. There was something in Lucian Vale's eyes when he looked at her, a recognition that made her feel exposed. At 5:30, most of the office had cleared out. Imani stayed late as usual, finishing reports for the next day. When she finally gathered her things to leave, she found a note sitting on her keyboard. Her hand trembled as she opened it. "I didn't want the suit to speak first. I wanted you to like the voice behind the words." Imani sank back into her chair, the note clutched in her hand. It couldn't be him. It was impossible. But as she replayed their conversation in the break room, doubt crept in. The way he'd known her name. The way he'd said he noticed things others missed. Could Lucian Vale, billionaire CEO, really be her secret admirer? The thought was terrifying. Men with power wanted things from women like her. They didn't leave poetry and wildflowers. They didn't see past appearances to the person beneath. Yet something in his eyes had seemed genuine, vulnerable even. Imani carefully folded the note and placed it with the others in her drawer. Whatever game this was, she needed to be careful. People like her didn't get fairy tales. They got reality, sometimes harsh, always predictable. And there was nothing predictable about Lucian Vale's apparent interest in her. As she left the building and stepped into the cool Seattle evening, Imani resolved to keep her guard up. The notes might be flattering, but her heart was not so easily won. Not after a lifetime of learning that what seemed too good to be true usually was. Little did she know that the man watching her leave from his car across the street was thinking the exact same thing about himself. The next morning, Imani arrived at work earlier than usual. Her mind had been racing all night, replaying her brief encounter with Lucian Vale in the break room. Could he really be the one leaving the notes? And if so, why her? She'd barely slept, torn between hope and suspicion. Men like Lucian Vale didn't pursue women like her without an agenda. That was the reality she'd learned through years in the foster system. When something seemed too good to be true, it usually was. As she approached her desk, she held her breath, half expecting another note. Instead, she found nothing. The surface was exactly as she'd left it the evening before. Imani felt a confusing mixture of relief and disappointment. "Get a grip," she muttered to herself as she booted up her computer. It was probably just a joke anyway. The day passed uneventfully. Imani threw herself into her work, scheduling meetings, preparing reports, and managing Margaret's hectic calendar. By lunchtime, she had almost convinced herself that the notes meant nothing, that her conversation with Lucian Vale had been a coincidence, until the elevator doors opened at 2:15 p.m. and he stepped out. Lucian was dressed in a perfectly tailored navy suit, his presence commanding the attention of everyone in the office. Executives who normally brushed past Imani's desk without a glance suddenly straightened their postures and put on their best smiles. "Mr. Vale, what a pleasant surprise," Margaret Gushay-D, emerging from her office. "We didn't expect you today." "I was in the building for another meeting," Lucian replied, his voice cool and professional. "Thought I'd stop by to discuss the partnership details in person." As Margaret ushered him toward the conference room, Lucian's eyes briefly met Imani's. Something in his gaze made her heart skip, a flash of warmth in otherwise guarded eyes. "Ms. Rhodes, please bring in the Vale Tech proposal and some coffee, Margaret called over her shoulder. "Tea," Lucian corrected. "Ms. Rhodes prefers tea, I believe. Perhaps she could join us with the refreshments." Margaret looked surprised but nodded. "Of course, Imani, bring tea and join us to take notes." Imani sat frozen at her desk for a moment. He remembered she drank tea, and he'd asked for her to join the meeting, something Margaret had never done before. With slightly trembling hands, she gathered the Vale Tech folders and prepared a tray with tea. As she entered the conference room, she felt Lucian's eyes on her, tracking her movements with interest that he didn't bother to hide. Throughout the meeting, Imani took diligent notes, while executives from both companies discussed terms and projections. Though she spoke only when addressed directly, she could feel Lucian watching her. Not in the uncomfortable way men sometimes stared, but with curiosity, and something that looked almost like admiration. When the meeting ended, executives filed out of the room, already discussing dinner plans and golf outings. Imani stayed behind to collect her notes and the tea tray. "Did you get the note yesterday?" Lucian asked quietly when they were alone. Imani looked up, her suspicions confirmed. "It was you." He nodded, his confident demeanor faltering slightly. "I'm not very good at this." "At what? Leaving anonymous notes for you, our employees' assistants?" There was an edge to her voice that surprised even her. "At letting someone see past the title," he answered honestly. "At being just a man interested in an extraordinary woman." Imani felt her defenses rise. "Mr. Vale." "Lucian," he corrected. "Mr. Vale," she continued firmly. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but I'm not interested in being anyone's office entertainment." A flash of hurt crossed his face. "Is that what you think this is? A game? What else could it be?" Imani gathered her things, avoiding his eyes. "Men like you don't notice women like me without a reason." "Men like me?" There was a hint of challenge in his voice. "You don't know me, Imani." The way he said her name, soft but certain, made her pause. "Oh, you're right, I don't know you," she admitted. "And you don't know me. You've built up some fantasy based on watching me from a distance." Lucian stepped closer, his expression serious. "Then let me know you. Have dinner with me." Imani stared at him in disbelief. "Dinner? With you? Do you know how that would look?" "I don't care how it looks." "Well, I do," she retorted. "I've worked hard to be taken seriously here. Dating the billionaire CEO of our partner company isn't exactly the way to maintain professional respect." Lucian considered this, then nodded slowly. "You're right. I wasn't thinking about how it would affect you." He took a business card from his pocket and wrote something on the back. "This is my personal number, not my assistant's line, just mine. If you change your mind about dinner, call me." He placed the card on the table between them, then turned to leave. At the door, he paused. "The notes weren't a game, Imani. They were the only way I could think of to speak to you without my name getting in the way first." After he left, Imani sank into a chair, her heart racing. She stared at the business card for a long moment before slipping it into her pocket. In his sleek black Aston Martin, Lucian loosened his tie with frustration. He wasn't used to rejection, not because women didn't say no to him, but because he rarely asked for anything personal in the first place. His phone rang and his assistant's name flashed on the screen. "What is it, Robert?" he answered curtly. "Sir, the board is asking for confirmation about tomorrow's meeting, and your mother called again about the charity gala next week." Lucian sighed. "Tell the board I'll be there, and tell my mother I'm sending a donation, but won't attend." "She was quite insistent, sir. Said something about appropriate appearances for the family name." "The family name has survived worse than my absence at a gala," Lucian replied coldly. "Anything else?" "Ms. Chen called about your dinner plans tonight." Lucian had forgotten all about his scheduled date with Jessica Chen, the daughter of a business associate. Another perfectly appropriate match that his mother had orchestrated. "Cancel it," he said. "Send flowers and my apologies." "May I ask why, sir? Ms. Chen is—" "That will be all, Robert," Lucian cut him off. After hanging up, Lucian drove aimlessly through the Seattle streets, his mind on Imani. Her reaction had surprised him. Most women would have been flattered by his attention, eager for what his wealth and status could provide. But Imani had looked at him with suspicion, even anger, as if his interest were an insult rather than a compliment. For the first time in years, Lucian felt unsure of himself. The notes had been impulsive, not at all his usual calculated approach to everything in life, but something about Imani's quiet dignity, her invisible strength, had made him want to reach out in a way that gave her the power to respond or not. He realized now how it must have seemed to her. A powerful man watching from the shadows, leaving cryptic messages. No wonder she was suspicious. Lucian pulled over and took out his phone. He needed to make this right. That evening, Imani sat in her small apartment, staring at Lucian's business card. The elegant embossed letters seemed to mock her simple surroundings, the second-hand furniture, the worn carpet, the faded curtains. This was her reality, not flowers and poetry and billionaires. Her phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. "I owe you an apology. The notes were presumptuous. I should have introduced myself properly from the beginning. LV." Imani's heart raced. How had he gotten her number? As if reading her mind, another text came through. "Your number was in the company directory. I should have asked first. Another thing to apologize for." Despite herself, Imani smiled. She typed a response. "Most billionaires don't apologize twice in the same text." His reply came quickly. "I'm not most billionaires, and you're not most women." Imani stared at her phone, unsure how to respond. After a moment, she wrote, "Why me, Mr. Vale? There are countless beautiful, accomplished women in your social circle." There was a long pause before his answer appeared. "Because you make silence feel full. Because when everyone else is shouting for attention, you simply exist confidently and completely. And because you correct powerful men without flinching and help others without seeking credit. Because you read classic novels in break rooms instead of scrolling through social media. Because in a world of noise, you're the quiet I didn't know I was looking for." Imani read the message 3 times, her eyes filling with tears she didn't expect. No one had ever seen her so clearly. No one had ever valued the very things about herself that she thought made her invisible. Before she could respond, another text arrived. "Too much, too." The vulnerability in those 2 words touched her more than his eloquent explanation. Lucian Vale, the man whose cold business tactics were legendary, was worried he'd said too much. "No," she replied. "Not too much. Just unexpected." Good unexpected or bad unexpected? Imani hesitated, then wrote, "I'm still deciding." "Fair enough," he responded. "Would dinner help you decide? No pressure. Public place. Your choice of restaurant." Imani's finger hovered over the keyboard. Everything in her past warned her to say no. Men with power wanted things. They took things. They didn't give without expecting something in return. But something about the way he'd looked at her in that conference room, not like a billionaire looking at an assistant, but like a Ma-en seeing a woman who intrigued him, made her want to take a chance. "Italian food, Friday at 7, I'll meet you there." She sent the text before she could change her mind, including the name of a small family restaurant in her neighborhood, far from the upscale places someone like him would usually frequent. His response was immediate. "I'll be there, looking forward to it, Imani." She put down her phone, her heart pounding. What was she doing? Dating a billionaire was the plot of a ridiculous romance novel, not her real life. Yet here she was, agreeing to dinner with Lucien Vale, the man whose notes had made her feel seen for the first time in her life. Friday evening arrived too quickly. Imani changed her outfit 3 times before settling on a simple blue dress, the nicest thing she owned, but still modest compared to what women in Lucien's world would wear. She arrived at Bella Notte 10 minutes early, her estomac in knots. The small Italian restaurant was cozy and unpretentious, with checkered tablecloths and photos of Italy on the walls. It was popular with locals, but unknown to the city's elite. To her surprise, Lucien was already there, sitting at a corner table. He dressed down in slacks and a button-up shirt with no tie, though Imani could tell from the subtle logo that his casual clothes probably cost more than her rent. He stood when he saw her, a genuine smile warming his usually serious face. "You came," he said, as if he'd been half expecting her to cancel. "I said I would," she replied, taking the seat he pulled out for her. An older woman approached their table with a warm smile. "Imani, so good to see you, dear. Your usual table, I see." "Thanks, Maria. This is my friend, Lucien." If Maria recognized the famous CEO, she didn't show it. "Any friend of Imani's is welcome here. I'll bring Somi bread and wine to start." After she left, Lucien raised an eyebrow. "Your usual table?" Imani nodded. "I come here every Friday. Have since I moved to Seattle 5 years ago." "Alone?" "Usually." She shrugged. "I like the routine. The food is good, and Maria and her husband Antonio treat me like family." Understanding crossed Lucien's face. "Something you didn't have much of growing up." Imani stiffened. "What do you know about my childhood?" "Nothing," he admitted. "Just what I've observed about you. The way you're surprised by kindness. The way you keep people at a distance," he paused. "The way you look at groups of friends like you're watching something through a window." His perception unsettled her. "You've been watching me very closely, Mr. Vale." "Lucien," he corrected gently. "And yes, I have. Not in a creepy way, I hope. More in a fascinated way." Maria returned with bread and wine, giving Imani a moment to collect herself. After taking their orders, she left them alone again. "Your turn," Imani said, breaking the silence. "Tell me something about yourself that isn't in the business magazines." Lucien took a sip of wine, considering. "I have a collection of first-edition classic novels. I read them when I can't sleep, which is often insomnia?" He nodded. "My mind doesn't quiet easily. Too many projects, problems, possibilities always spinning." "What are you reading now?" she asked, genuinely curious. "Dickens. Great Expectations." A wry smile touched his lips. "Fitting, given my family's obsession with status and wealth." "Are they like the Havishams and Pockets?" Surprise flickered across his face. "You've read it?" "I've read most classics," Imani said. "Books were my escape growing up. Foster homes don't offer much privacy, but no one bothers you when you're reading." The words slipped out before she could stop them. She rarely mentioned her foster care background to anyone. Lucien didn't react with the pity she'd come to expect. Instead, he simply nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Books were my companions too," he said. "Different circumstances, but similar feeling. My parents were always traveling, networking, building the Vale Empire. I was raised by nannies and boarding schools." "Poor little rich boy." Imani couldn't help the slight sarcasm in her tone. To her surprise, Lucien laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his face. "Fair enough. I'm not claiming my privileged loneliness compares to what you experienced. But we do have something in common. We both know what it's like to be surrounded by people and still feel alone." The honesty in his voice disarmed her. Imani found herself relaxing as their food arrived, the conversation flowing more naturally than she'd expected. Lucien was different here, away from the corporate world. More relaxed, occasionally even funny, his sharp intelligence directed at making her laugh rather than intimidating a boardroom. They talked about books, music, and their favorite spots in Seattle. Not once did he mention his wealth or status. Not once did he check his phone or seem distracted. His focus remained entirely on her, as if she were the most fascinating person he'd ever met. By the time they finished dessert, a tiramisu they shared, 3 hours had passed without Imani noticing. "Can I walk you home?" Lucian asked as they left the restaurant. Imani hesitated. "I don't live in the kind of neighborhood you're used to." "I don't care about that," he said quietly. "I do," she replied. "I'm not ashamed of where I live, but I'm not ready for you to see it either." Lucian nodded, respecting her boundary. "Then can I call you a car?" "I'll take the bus. It's how I always get home." He looked like he wanted to argue, but stopped himself. "Will you text me when you're home safely?" The concern in his voice made her smile. "Yes, I can do that." They stood on the sidewalk, an awkward moment stretching between them. Imani wasn't sure what the protocol was for ending a date with a billionaire. "I had a nice time," she said finally. "Thank you for dinner." "I had a nice time too." Lucian stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. "Nicer than any dinner I've had in years, actually." The intensity of his gaze made her heart race. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her. Part of her wanted him to. Instead, he took her hand and squeezed it gently. "Good night, Imani. I hope we can do this again." "Maybe," she said, not ready to commit. "Good night, Lucian." As she walked toward the bus stop, she could feel him watching, making sure she got there safely. The gesture ouched her more than she wanted to admit. On the bus ride home, Imani's mind raced with conflicting emotions. Lucian wasn't what she'd expected. There was a vulnerability beneath his powerful exterior that resonated with her, a loneliness she recognized. But she'd learned long ago not to trust feelings like these. People disappointed you. People left. Building walls was safer than building hopes. Yet as she texted him that she'd gotten home safely and received his simple, "Thank you, sweet dreams, Imani," in return, she couldn't ignore the warmth spreading through her chest. For the first time in years, Imani Rhodes was letting someone see past her carefully constructed walls, and it terrified her how much she wanted to keep going. Across the city in his penthouse, Lucian stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the Seattle skyline. His phone was still in his hand, Imani's text lighting up the SC Reen. Robert entered with some documents requiring signatures. "How was your evening, sir?" he asked, noticing Lucian's unusually relaxed demeanor. "Good," Lucian replied simply. "Very good." Ms. Chen called again. She seemed quite upset about the cancelled dinner. "Send her more flowers," Lucian said dismissively. Robert hesitated. "Your mother also called. She mentioned something about the Hamilton's daughter being in town next week. She'd like to arrange a dinner." Lucian turned from the window, his expression hardening. "Cancel it. In fact, cancel any social engagements my mother tries to arrange for the next month. Sir, the family has certain expectations. The family will have to adjust their expectations," Lucian cut in sharply. "Is there anything else?" "No, sir." Robert placed the documents on the desk and left quickly. Alone again, Lucian looked back at his phone, at Imani's simple message. He'd dated models, socialites, and business heiresses, women his mother approved of, women who fit the veil image. None of them had made him feel the way he had tonight, sitting in a modest Italian restaurant with a woman who challenged him, who saw past his wealth, who made him work for every smile. Imani Rhodes was nothing like the women in his world, and that was exactly why he couldn't stop thinking about her. For the first time in his life, Lucian Vale was pursuing something his family wouldn't understand, something that wasn't about business strategy or social advantage, something that felt dangerously close to real. Over the next few weeks, Imani and Lucian fell into an unexpected rhythm. Dinner at her favorite Italian restaurant every Friday, occasional lunch meetings in the Clarion Tower break room, text messages throughout the day. Nothing elaborate, just small observations that made the other smile. For Imani, it was unlike any relationship she'd ever experienced. Lucian never pushed for more than she was ready to give. He respected her boundaries, her independence, her need to keep their connection private. "You never asked to come up to my apartment," she commented one Friday night as they walked from the restaurant to her bus stop. "You've made it clear you're not ready for that," Lucian replied simply. "I can wait." "Most men wouldn't." "I'm not Mo Saint Men." He smiled that rare smile that transformed his usually serious face. Besides, I'm enjoying getting to know you this way. No distractions, no expectations. Imani studied him in the glow of the streetlight. It's hard for me to trust this, to trust you. I know. He took her hand, a gesture that had become comfortable between them. Trust takes time. I'm not going anywhere, Imani. His patience both comforted and confused her. Men in her experience weren't patient. They didn't wait. They didn't send thoughtful texts in the middle of the day just to make her smile. They didn't remember details about her favorite books or tea preferences. But Lucian did. And slowly the walls around her heart began to crack. At work, Imani maintained her professional demeanor. No one knew about her relationship with the CEO of Vailtech except Tyler, who had figured it out after spotting them once at a coffee shop. The Ice King and the Invisible Assistant, Tyler had teased, is like a modern fairy tale. It's not a fairy tale, Imani had insisted. It's just, I don't know what it is. But whatever it was changing her. She caught herself smiling more often, taking more care with her appearance, speaking up more in meetings when she had valuable input. Margaret had noticed the change too. You seem different lately, she commented one afternoon. More confident. Imani had simply shrugged. Just growing into my role, I guess. The truth was more complicated. For the first time in her life, someone was seeing her, really seeing her. And it made her stand taller, speak clearer, believe in her own worth in a way she never had before. For Lucian, the relationship was equally transformative. The man, known for his cold business acumen and ruthless negotiation tactics, found himself softening around the edges. His executive team noticed his lighter mood, the occasional smile that would cross his face when he checked his phone. Whatever's got you distracted better be worth it, his CFO commented after Lucian missed a point in a board presentation. The Chen merger won't close itself. Lucian had brushed off the comment, but later that night, he found himself wondering if Imani Rhodes was indeed worth it. Worth the distraction, the complication, the inevitable clash between her world and his. The answer came more easily than he expected. Yes, she was worth it. Worth the raised eyebrows when he cancelled social engagements. Worth the mounting pressure from his mother to meet suitable women from their social circle. Worth the uncertainty of pursuing someone who might never fully trust him or the world he came from. Imani challenged him in ways no one else dared. She didn't care about his money or his status. She saw P as the veil name to the man beneath, the man who sometimes felt as lonely at the top as she did in her invisibility. You never talk about your family," she said one evening as they shared dessert. Lucian's expression tightened. "Not much to say. My father built Vailtech from nothing. My mother managed our social connections. They were more focused on the family legacy than on actual family. And now? My father died 2 years ago. Heart attack in the emididdle of a board meeting." His voice was flat, emotionless. "My mother maintains our social calendar and reminds me regularly of my duty to marry well and produce heirs." Imani raised an eyebrow. "Marry well? What century is this?" A humorless smile touched his lips. "In my mother's world, the 19th. Bloodlines and bank accounts still matter more than love." "Is that why you're with me?" Imani asked, her voice deliberately casual. "Rebellion against Mommy's expectations?" Lucian's eyes snapped to hers, suddenly intense. "Is that what you think?" She shrugged, trying to hide the vulnerability behind the question. It would make sense. The billionaire and the nobody, classic rebellion narrative. "You've never been a nobody." His voice was low, fierce. "Not to me." The intensity in his gaze made her look away. "Then what am I to you, Lucian?" He reached across the table, taking her hand. "You're the first real thing in my life in a very long time." The raw honesty in his voice made her heart race. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust the connection growing between them. But years of disappointment had taught Imani to expect the worst, to protect herself from the inevitable moment when people showed their true colors. "What happens when your mother finds out about me?" she asked, voicing one of her deepest fears. "When your board questions why you're dating an executive assistant instead of someone from your world?" "I don't care what they think. You say that now, but reality has a way of complicating things." Lucian squeezed her hand. Then we'll face those complications together. It was a nice sentiment, but Imani couldn't shake the feeling that their bubble would burst sooner rather than later. She didn't have to wait long to be proven right. The following Monday, Imani arrived at work to find the office buzzing with excitement. A tall, elegantly de-dressed woman was standing by Margaret's office, her expensive perfume wafting through the air. "That's Victoria Vale," Tyler whispered as he passed Imani's desk. "Lucian's mother. Apparently she's here for the partnership signing ceremony tomorrow." Imani felt her stomach drop. Lucian hadn't mentioned his mother would be visiting. Then again, they'd spent the weekend exchanging text messages, but hadn't seen each other in person since Friday. Victoria Vale turned, her sharp eyes sweeping the office before landing on Imani. Something in her gaze made Imani sit up straighter, a chill running down her spine. "You must be Imani Rhodes," Victoria said, approaching her desk with the confidence of someone used to commanding attention. "Margaret speaks highly of your organizational skills." "Thank you, Mrs. Vale," Imani replied, keeping her voice professional despite the hammering of her heart. "Is there something I can help you with?" Victoria smiled, but the expression didn't reach her eyes. "Perhaps you could point me toward the conference room where tomorrow's signing will take place. I'd like to check the arrangements personally." "Of course. It's down the hall to the right. I'd be happy to show you." "That won't be necessary." Victoria's gaze was appraising, uncomfortably direct. "I understand you've been spending time with my son." The statement, delivered in her casual tone that belied its significance, made Imani freeze. "I'm not sure what you mean, Mrs. Vale. Please, Ms. Rhodes, let's not pretend. Lucian may think he's being discreet, but a mother always knows." Victoria leaned closer, lowering her voice. "He's always had a soft spot for charity cases." The words stung like a slap. Imani maintained her composure with effort. "I'm not sure what your son has told you about me, but I assure you, I don't need anyone's charity." "Of course not," Victoria said smoothly. "You seem very capable, but surely you understand that Lucian's position requires certain considerations when it comes to his personal relationships." Before Imani could respond, Margaret emerged from her office. "Mrs. Vale, the CEO is ready to see you now." Victoria straightened, her society smile back in place. "Thank you, Margaret." She turned back to Imani. "Do think about what I said, DR. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do for those we care about is to recognize when we are holding them back." With that, she glided away, leaving Imani sitting rigid at her desk, humiliation burning in her chest. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Imani threw herself into work, avoiding the break room, avoiding any place she might run into Lucian. She wasn't ready to face him, not with his mother's words still echoing in her mind. A charity case. Hall, ding him back. Victoria Vale had merely voiced the doubts Imani had been harboring since the beginning. She and Lucian came from different worlds. Eventually, those worlds would collide, and she knew which one would shatter. When her phone buzzed with a text from Lucian asking to meet after work, she replied that she wasn't feeling well and needed to go straight home. It wasn't a complete lie. The encounter with Victoria had left her feeling physically ill. That night, Imani curled up on her worn couch, tears she rarely allowed herself to shed flowing freely. She'd been a fool to think someone like Lucian Vale could ever truly be part of her life. His world of board meetings and charity galas and family expectations would always pull him back. And she would always be the outsider, the charity case, the woman not quite good enough. Her phone buzzed again with another text from Lucian. "I heard my mother stop Ped by your office today. Whatever she said, please don't let it change things between us. Call me when you can." Imani stared at the message, conflict raging within her. Part of her wanted to call him, to hear his voice, to let him convince her that his mother was wrong, that they could make this work despite everything stacked against them. But the larger part, the part shaped by years of disappointment and abandonment, knew better. People always left. People always chose what was easiest, what was expected. In the end, Lucian would too. Better to end things now on her terms than to wait for the inevitable heartbreak. With trembling fingers, she typed a response. "Your mother helped me see what I already knew. We're from different worlds, Lucian. It was nice while it lasted, but let's not pretend it could ever be more than that." She hit send before she could change her mind, then turned off her phone, unable to bear seeing his response. The walls around her heart, which had begun to crack over the past weeks, sealed themselves shut once more. Lucian stared at Imani's text, disbelief turning quickly to anger. What had his mother said to her? Whatever it was, it had clearly been enough to make Imani retreat behind her walls again. He tried calling, but the call went straight to voicemail. She'd turned off her phone. "Damn it," he muttered, pacing his Pento use. He should have warned Imani that his mother was coming to town, should have prepared her for Victoria Vale's particular brand of interference. His phone rang, and he answered without checking the caller ID, hoping it was Imani. "Lucian, darling." His mother's voice came through the speaker instead. "I was hoping we could have dinner tonight. There's someone I'd like you to meet. Jessica Chen's cousin is in town. Lovely girl, Stanford MBA, family connections in Hong Kong that could be useful for the merger." Lucian's grip on his phone tightened. "What did you say to Imani Rhodes?" A pause. "The assistant?" "Nothing of consequence, just a friendly chat." "Nothing of consequence," he repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. "Yet she's just ended things between us via text after speaking with you." "Oh, Lucian," his mother sighed. "You can't be serious about that girl. She's a secretary." "Executive assistant," he corrected automatically. "And I'm serious about her, more serious than I've been about anyone." "Don't be dramatic. You've known her for what, a month? This is just another of your phases, like when you decided to backpack through Europe after college, instead of taking your place at the company." Lucian closed his eyes, fighting to maintain his composure. "This isn't a phase, Mother. Imani is special." "Of course she is," Victoria said, her tone patronizing. "They're all special at first. But the novelty will wear off, and you'll remember your responsibilities to this family and the company." "My responsibilities?" Lucian's voice rose. "I've done nothing but fulfill my responsibilities since I was 18. I built Valetech into what it is today. I've tripled our market value. I've done everything expected of me except marry someone from your approved list. Because family matters, Lucian. Legacy matters. Your father understood that." "My father worked himself into an early grave for that legacy," Lucian shot back. "And for what? So I could be just as miserable as he was? So I could marry for connections instead of love?" The word love hung in the air between them. It had slipped out without thought, but Lucian realized with sudden clarity that it was true. What he felt for Imani wasn't just attraction or fascination. It was deeper, more profound. "Eliove," his mother repeated, her voice cold. "Is that what you think this is?" "Yes," Lucian said, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "I love her." Victoria's sigh was heavy with disappointment. "Then I suggest you find a way to convince her of that. Because from our conversation today, I gathered she has serious doubts about fitting into your world." "What exactly did you say to her?" Lucian demanded. "Only what she needed to hear. If her feelings for you can't withstand a little reality check, then perhaps they weren't very strong to begin with." Lucian ended the call without responding, fury coursing through him. His mother had deliberately sabotaged his relationship with Imani, playing on her insecurities, widening the gap between their worlds. And Imani had let her. That thought brought him up short. For all her strength and intelligence, Imani was still carrying the scars of her past. Still expecting to be abandoned, to be found wanting. His mother had merely confirmed what Imani already feared, that she didn't belong in his world, that their relationship was temporary, that eventually he would choose his family and status over her. Lucian sank onto his couch, head in his hands. How could he convince her otherwise when she wouldn't even talk to him? The answer came to him slowly, not with grand gestures or expensive gifts. Those would only reinforce the distance between them. He needed to reach her the way he had in the beginning, with words that saw her, that recognized her worth beyond titles and status. With sudden determination, Lucian grabbed his keys and headed for the door. If Imani wouldn't answer his calls, he would have to find another way to reach her. The next morning, Imani arrived at work early, her eyes puffy from a night of little sleep. She'd spent hours second-guessing her decision to end things with Lucian, but in the cold light of day, she knew it had been the right choice. Their worlds were too different. The pain she felt now was nothing compared to what she would have felt later, when reality inevitably tore them apart. As she approached her desk, she froze. A small envelope sat propped against her computer monitor. Her name was written on the front in Lucian's distinctive handwriting. With trembling fingers, she opened it. "I understand why you're scared. I'm scared too. Not of my mother or what people might think, but of how much I've come to need your quiet strength in my life. Before you, I was just going through the motions. With you, I'm finally living. Please don't let fear make this decision for us. Meet me where we first really talked, the break room at noon today, just to talk. No pressure. If you don't come, I'll respect your choice and won't bother you again. But know this, you could never be a charity case to me. You're the most real thing in my world. L." Imani read the note twice, her heart pounding. The sincerity in his words made her throat tight with emotion. He understood her fear. He was acknowledging the gap between their worlds without dismissing it. But was understanding enough? Could they really bridge the divide between their lives, their backgrounds, their expectations? Throughout the morning, Imani moved through her tasks mechanically, her mind constantly returning to Lucian's note, to the decision she had to make by noon. Part of her wanted to ignore the note, to stick with her decision to end things. It would be safer that way, no risk of further heartbreak. But another part, the part that had started to hope, to dream, to believe in possibilities beyond her careful, controlled existence, whispered that maybe, just maybe, what they had was worth fighting for. At 11:58, Imani stood from her desk, her decision made. She walked slowly down the hall toward the break room, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. Outside the door, she paused, taking a deep breath. Then she pushed open the door. Lucian was standing by the window, his back to her. He turned at the sound of the door, and the relief on his face when he saw her made Imani's heart clench. "You came," he said simply. "I came," she echoed, staying near the door. "But I'm not sure why. Nothing has changed, Lucian. Your mother made that very clear." "Everything has changed," he countered, taking a step toward her. "Because now I know." "Know what?" "That I love you." The words hung in the air between them, momentous and terrifying. Imani felt her breath catch. "You don't mean that," she said quietly. "You can't." "Why not?" "Because people like you don't fall in love with people like me," she replied, voicing the belief that had been at the core of her resistance all along. They might be fascinated for a while, might enjoy the novelty, but eventually they return to their world. Lucian moved closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "What if I don't want that world anymore? What if the only world I want is the one with you in it?" The sincerity in his voice made Imani's carefully constructed defenses waver. "Your mother, my mother will adapt," he interrupted. "Or she won't. Either way, it's not her choice to make. It's mine. And I choose you, Imani. I choose the woman who sees past my wealth and status to the man beneath. The woman who challenges me, who doesn't care about my last name or my net worth." He was standing right in front of her now, close enough that she could see the vulnerability in his eyes, the fear of rejection that mirrored her own fear of abandonment. "I'm scared," she admitted in a whisper. "I know." He reached for her hand, and this time she let him take it. "I'm scared too. But I'm more scared of losing you than I am of what anyone else thinks." Imani looked down at their joined hands, his manicured, hers simple, a visible reminder of the differences between them. "What about when the novelty wears off?" she asked, voicing her deepest fear. "When the contrast between our worlds becomes too much?" Lucian gently tilted her chin up, making her meet his gaze. "What if it doesn't? What if every day I find new reasons to admire your strength, your intelligence, your heart? What if every day I thank whatever twist of fate brought you into my life?" Tears filled Imani's eyes. She wanted so badly to believe him, to trust in the possibility of a future together, despite everything stacked against them. "I can't promise it will be easy," Lucian continued, his thumb gently wiping away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "People will talk. My mother will scheme. There will be obstacles. But I can promise that you won't face them alone. that I will be beside you, fighting for us for as long as you'll have me." The vulnerability in his eyes, the sincerity in his voice, broke through the last of Imani's defenses. For all her life, she'd protected herself from hurt by expecting the worst, by keeping people at a distance. But Lucian had somehow slipped past those barriers, showing her a possibility she'd never dared to imagine. A life where she was seen, valued, loved for exactly who she was. "Okay," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Lucian's expression was cautious hope. "Okay?" Imani nodded, a small smile breaking through her tears. "Okay, we can try. I can't promise I won't be scared, that I won't sometimes doubt this, doubt us, but I want to try." The smile the tea transformed Lucian's face was like sunrise breaking through clouds. Without words, he pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. And for the first time in her life, Imani Rhodes allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was. From the doorway of the break room, Victoria Vale watched her son embrace the assistant, her lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. Her plan to drive a wedge between them had backfired spectacularly. She'd underestimated both of them, her son's determination and the assistant's resilience. The way Lucian looked at the girl was unlike anything Victoria had seen before, not the passing interest he'd shown in models and socialites, but something deeper, more genuine. As she turned and walked away, Victoria wondered if perhaps she had misjudged the situation entirely. If perhaps this Imani Rhodes was exactly what her son N needed, not a socially advantageous match, but a partner who saw him for himself. The thought was unsettling. It challenged everything Victoria had built her life around: status, connections, appearances. But the image of her son's face when he looked at Imani stayed with her. The happiness there was unmistakable, real in a way that had been missing for too long. For the first time, Victoria Vale wondered if she had been wrong about what truly mattered. The VAilTech Clarion partnership signing ceremony took place the following day in Clarion Tower's largest conference room. Executives in expensive suits mingled over coffee and pastries, congratulating each other on the deal that would benefit both companies. Imani stood in the background, efficiently managing the event details as always. But something had changed. She held herself differently, with more confidence, more presence. Several times, she caught Lucia N looking at her from across the room, a private smile passing between them. Victoria Vale noticed these exchanges, her sharp eyes missing nothing. Throughout the ceremony, she watched her son and the assistant, noting the subtle ways they communicated without words, the small nods, the brief glances, the way Lucian seemed more at ease when Imani was nearby. When the signing was complete and photographs had been taken, Victoria approached Imani, who was collecting empty coffee cups. "Ms. Rhodes," Victoria said, her voice cool but not unkind. "Might I have a word?" Imani tensed but nodded. "Of course, Mrs. Vale." They stepped into a quiet corner of the room, away from the celebrating executives. "I owe you an apology," Victoria said, surprising Imani completely. "My words yesterday were inappropriate and judgmental." Imani blinked, unsure how to respond. "Thank you for saying that." Victoria's perfectly manicured hands smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her designer suit. "I've spent my life believing certain things about success, about suitable matches, about what's best for my son and the Vale name." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "It's not easy to reconsider those beliefs." "I understand," Imani said, and she did. Every One had their version of walls built from past experiences, even Victoria Vale. "Lucian has never fought for anyone the way he fought for you yesterday," Victoria continued. "I've never seen him so passionate about anything outside of business. We care about each other," Imani said simply. Victoria studied her face. "Yes, I can see that now, and while I can't pretend I fully understand it, I respect my son's choices." She straightened, her society mask slipping back into place. "I can't promise to make this easy for either of you. Old habits die hard, but I won't actively stand in your way." It wasn't a warm embrace of their relationship, but Imani recognized it for what it was, a tentative olive branch from a woman who had spent decades defining herself by social status and appearances. "Thank you, Mrs. Vale. That's all we ask." Victoria nodded once, then rejoined the crowd, leaving Imani with the disty NCT impression that she had just passed some kind of test. Across the room, Lucian had been watching the exchange with concern. He excused himself from a conversation with Clarion's CEO and made his way to Imani's side. "Everything okay?" he asked quietly. "What did my mother say to you?" Imani smiled. "Actually, she apologized." Lucian's eyebrows shot up. "Victoria Vale apologized. Are you sure it was really her and not an imposter?" "It was her, Imani L. Ocht. She's trying, Lucian, in her own way." He shook his head in amazement. "That's unexpected." "People can surprise you," Imani said softly, "when you give them the chance." Lucian's gaze softened as he looked at her. "You certainly surprised me, Imani Rhodes, in the best possible way." Their moment was interrupted by Margaret calling for Imani's assistance with something. As she turned to go, Lucian caught her hand briefly. "Dinner tonight?" he asked. "My place this time? I want to cook for you." The invitation to his home, his private space, wasn't lost on Imani. It was another step forward, another wall coming down between them. "I'd like that," she replied with a smile. Lucian's penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of Seattle's most exclusive residential building. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered breathtaking views of the city and Puget Sound beyond. The furnishings were expensive, but surprisingly warm. Comfortable leather sofas, shelves filled with books, and walls featuring local artists rather than the ostentatious artwork Imani had expected. "It's not what I imagined," she admitted as Lucian gave her a tour. "What did you imagine? Gold fixtures and marble statues," he teased. "Something less lived in," she replied honestly. "Less personal." He smiled, pleased by her observation. "This is my sanctuary, the one place I don't have to be Lucian Vale, CEO. I can just be Lucian." The kitchen was a chef's dream, all stainless steel and granite, with professional-grade appliances. Lucian moved through it with surprising ease, chopping vegetables and seasoning chicken, like someone who actually cooked regularly. "Another surprise," Imani commented, sitting at the island counter with a glass of wine. "The billionaire who cooks." "My third nanny was Italian," Lucian explained. "She believed everyone should know how to make a proper meal, regardless of wealth. Said it builds character." He smiled at the memory. "She was fired when my mother found out, but the lessons stuck." As they prepared dinner together, Lucian cooking, Imani helping with small tasks, the final barriers between them seemed to dissolve. They talked about books they loved, places they wanted to visit, childhood memories both good and bad. Lucian spoke of the pressure of being the Vale heir of a father who measured love in achievements. Imani shared stories of foster homes, some kind, some cold, none permanent. "The hardest part wasn't the moving," she told him as they sat down to eat. "It was never knowing if the next place would be better or worse, never having control over my own life." Lucian nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Is that why you're so organized now, why you like routine?" "Probably," she admitted. "Structure makes me feel safe, in control." "And I threatened that control," he said, connecting the dots. "With the notes, with pursuing you." Imani considered this. "Yes, but in a good way, I think. You made me realize I'd been hiding behind that control, playing it so safe that I wasn't really living." After dinner, they moved to the living room, where a wall of windows showcased the city lights below. Imani stood looking out at the view, aware of Lucian watching her from the sea couch. "What?" she asked, turning to find his eyes on her. "You belong here," he said quietly. "In this space, in my life, you know that, right?" The question touched on her deepest insecurity, the fear that she was just visiting his world, that eventually the differences between them would become too great. "I want to believe that," she answered honestly. Lucian stood and joined her by the window. "Then let me help you believe it." He took her hands in his. "Imani, I've spent my life surrounded by people who wanted something from me. My money, my influence, my name. You're the first person who has ever wanted just me." The vulnerability in his voice moved her. For all his wealth and power, Lucien Vale had his own insecurities, his own fears of not being enough just as himself. "I do want you," she whispered. "Just you. Not the CEO or the billionaire or the Vale heir. Just Lucien." He pulled her close, his kiss gentle at first, then deepening with an intensity that took her breath away. Imani felt herself responding, all her carefully constructed walls crumbling in the face of this connection that had grown between them, unexpected, challenging, and more real than anything she'd ever known. When they finally broke apart, Lucien rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he whispered, "not just tonight, but in my life. Stay." In that moment, looking into his eyes, Imani made her choice. She would no longer let fear of the future rob her of present joy. She would no longer expect the worst from people, from Lucien based on past hurts. "I'll stay," she promised, and sealed it with another kiss. Over the next few months, Imani and Lucien's relationship deepened in ways neither had expected. They settled into a rhythm that bridged their different worlds: quiet evenings at her modest apartment, dinner parties at his penthouse, weekends exploring Seattle's neighborhoods that neither had fully appreciated before. The gossip had been immediate and intense when their relationship became public. Office whispers, business magazine speculation, society page rumors. But Imani found herself caring less than she'd expected. Lucien's unwavering support and Victoria's grudging acceptance helped, but mostly it was her own growing confidence that made the difference. She was more than an executive assistant, more than a foster kid who'd never been wanted. She was Imani Rhodes, smart, capable, worthy of love, and if others couldn't see that, it was their loss, not hers. "You've changed," Tyler commented one day over lunch. "In a good way. You stand taller. Speak up more." "I've always had opinions," Imani replied with a smile. "Now I just share them." The biggest change came 3 months into their relationship when Margaret announced her retirement. Imani expected to be assigned to the new SVP as an assistant. Instead, she was called into the CEO's office. "Ms. Rhodes," said Gerald Simmons, Clarion's CEO, "Margaret speaks very highly of your capabilities. She's recommended you for a promotion." Imani blinked in surprise. "A promotion?" "To junior project manager in our marketing division. It would mean a significant pay increase and your own office." He smiled. "Margaret says you've been doing half her job for years anyway. Might as well make it official." Stunned, Imani accepted the offer. When she told Lucien that evening, his proud smile warmed her heart. "They finally see what I've seen all along," he said, pulling her into an embrace. "How brilliant you are." "You didn't have anything to do with this, did you?" she asked suspiciously. Lucien raised his hands in surrender. "Not a thing. This is all you, Imani. All your hard work and talent." She believed him. One of the foundations of their relationship had become absolute honesty, even when it was difficult. They had both lived with too many pretenses in their lives to accept anything less from each other. The ValeTech annual charity gala was one of Seattle's most prestigious social events. Held in the grand ballroom of the city's oldest hotel, it attracted the elite of the business and social worlds, all dressed in their finest, all eager to see and be seen. Imani stood in front of the mirror in Lucien's penthouse, hardly recognizing herself in the emerald green gown he'd helped her select. It was elegant without being flashy, the color vibrant against her dark skin. "You look beautiful," Lucien said, appearing behind her in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. "I look terrified," she corrected with a nervous laugh. "All those people, all those judgments." He turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "None of them matter. Only you matter. Easy for you to say. You grew up in this world and hated every minute of it," he reminded her, "until you showed me there could be something real even in the midst of all that pretense." Imani took a deep breath, drawing strength from his confidence in her. "Okay, let's do this." The ballroom was a sea of designer gowns and custom tuxedos, crystal chandeliers casting a warm glow over the proceedings. As they entered, Imani felt the weight of curious stares, heard the subtle buzz of whispers. Lucian Vale had never brought a date to the gala before, and certainly not someone from outside their privileged circle. Victoria approached them immediately, resplendent in a silver gown and diamonds. "Lucian, Imani." Her greeting was civil, if not warm. "You both look wonderful." "Thank you, Mother," Lucian replied, his hand supportive at the small OF Imani's back. "There are several people eager to meet you, Imani," Victoria continued, including the governor's wife, who was most impressed when I mentioned your recent promotion at Clarion. Imani blinked in surprise. Victoria had been talking about her, not as Lucian's unusual choice of partner, but as a professional in her own right. Lucian looked equally surprised but pleased. His relationship with his mother remained complicated, but Victoria's effort to accept Imani had gone a long way toward healing old wounds. Throughout the evening, Imani found herself the center of more positive attention than she'd expected. Yes, there were the judgmental looks and barely concealed sneers from some of the old money crowd. But there were also genuine conversations, interest in her work, even a few women who confided that they found her presence refreshing in the often stifling social scene. "Having fun?" Lucian asked, finding her by the champagne fountain after they'd been separated by various conversations. "Actually, yes," she admitted, "though I think your mother has been running interference for me. She's redirected at least 3 gossipy women who were headed my way." Lucian chuckled. "Victoria Vale's social shield. Never thought I'd see the day." As the orchestra began playing a waltz, he held out his hand. "Dance with me." Imani hesitated. "I'm not much of a dancer." "Neither am I," he confessed. "But I'd like to hold you in my arms in front of everyone here, to show them what really matters to me." How could she refuse such a request? Imani took his hand and followed him to the dance floor, where he pulled her close, guiding her in a simple waltz. She felt the stares, heard the whispers, but in Lucian's arms they faded to background noise. "I love you," he said softly for her ears alone. "More than I ever thought possible." The words which had once terrified her now filled her with warmth. "I love you too," she replied, no longer afraid to admit it, to him or to herself. As they danced, Imani realized how far she had come from the invisible assistant who had thrown away that first anonymous note. She had allowed herself to be seen, to be known, to be loved, and in doing so, had found strength she never knew she possessed. Later that night, as they stood on the balcony of his penthouse looking out at the city lights, Lucian seemed unusually quiet. "Everything okay?" Imani asked, leaning into his side. "Better than okay," he replied. "Just thinking about how much has changed in a few months. How much you've changed me." She smiled up at him. "For the better, I hope." "Definitely for the better." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Imani, these past months with you have been the happiest of my life. You've shown me what it means to be truly seen, truly known, truly loved for who I am, not what I have." Something in his tone made her heart beat faster. "Lucian." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I had this whole speech planned," he said, with a nervous laugh, so unlike his usual confidence, "about how you make silence feel full and how I want to spend the rest of my life learning all the ways you glow when no one is looking." Tears filled Imani's eyes as he opened the box, revealing a ring with a single perfect emerald surrounded by small diamonds. "Green like your dress tonight," he explained. "Like your eyes in certain light. Not a traditional diamond because there's nothing traditional about us, about how we found each other." He took a deep breath. "I'm not asking you to give up your independence or your career or your apartment if you're not ready. I'm just asking if you'll consider building a future with me, one day at a time." Imani looked at the man before her, powerful in the eyes of the world, but vulnerable with her. The man who had seen her when she was invisible. The man who had waited patiently for her to lower her walls. "Yes," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I'll build a future with you." The joy that transformed his face as he slipped the ring onto her finger was worth every moment of fear she'd overcome to reach this point. Lucian pulled her into his arms, his kiss a promise of all they would share in the years to come. For a woman who had grown up believing she wasn't meant to be chosen, to be wanted, to be loved, this moment felt like a miracle. Not because Lucien was wealthy or powerful, but because he had chosen her for exactly who she was. And she had found the courage to choose him back. 2 weeks later, Imani was working Lat E in her new office at Clarion Tower. The promotion to junior project manager had come with more responsibility and longer hours, but she loved the challenge. For the first time in her career, she was being recognized for her intelligence and creativity, not just her organizational skills. As she was finishing up a presentation for the next day, her phone buzzed with a text from Lucien. "Check your email." Curious, she opened her inbox to find a message with no subject line. Inside was a simple note. "I'll wait by the elevator at 7:00. If you come down, I'll take you to dinner. If not, I'll keep writing until you're ready. Yours, truly." Imani smiled at the callback to how their relationship had begun, with written words that had somehow seen into her soul. She checked the time. 6:55 p.m. Quickly gathering her things, she closed her office door and headed for the elevator. As the doors closed and the car began its descent to the lobby, Imani thought about the journey that had brought her here. From the foster child who had learned never to expect permanence, to the executive assistant who had made herself invisible, to the woman who had found the courage to be seen, to be known, to be loved. The elevator chimed as it reached the lobby floor. Imani took a deep breath, smoothed her skirt, and watched as the doors slid open. He was there. Lucien Vale, billionaire CEO, her fiancé, the man who had broken through all her carefully constructed walls. He was holding nothing but hope in his eyes and a single wild flower in his hand, just like the ones from that first bouquet months ago. Imani stepped out of the elevator, her heart full. "Ready for dinner?" Lucien asked, offering her the flower. She took it, her fingers brushing his, the emerald ring catching the light. "Ready for everything," she replied. As they walked to tea of Clarion Tower together, Imani realized that some stories do have happy endings, even for people who had stopped believing in them. Some walls are meant to come down, some hearts are meant to be found, and some loves are worth the risk of being truly, completely seen. The end.